Hey guys, DeathClock Dave here, and welcome to my fifth Convergence of Cyriss game log. In these game logs, I'm doing a general battle report and reflections and lessons learned from every Convergence of Cyriss game that I play in 2018. The purpose of these logs is to have me reviewing the games and learning from my mistakes and growing as a player, and if these logs also help you guys, then that is awesome. So my pairing this week was my standard Axis Orion Destruction Initiative pairing, and my opponent was playing Circle. He was playing Chromac 2 in Call of the Wild with a ton of beasts, and Tanith in the Wild Hunt with a ton of infantry. And the scenario that we were playing this week is Scenario 2 Standoff. So looking at my opponent's list, in the Chromac list, he had a ton of beasts, including Purebloods and the Warpwolf Stalkers, so lots of pretty high defense beasts. He also had Getorix, so just lots of beef on the board, and in his Tanith list, he had a ton of infantry. I can't remember the name of the units that he had, but they are 10-man units, and I believe they have a 2-man UA, and every model in those units has rate of fire 2 on their weapon, and I think he had 2 of those units, so tons of shooting, tons of infantry. So looking at the pairing, my first reaction was to pick Orion. So with the Circle Beasts, they're typically fairly high defense, but not high armor. So I figured Orion's feat would be pretty effective, and even if he tried to keep Fury off the beasts, his beasts are typically defense 14 or around there, so they can be hard to hit in general. So even if he doesn't have Fury on his beasts, it would make it easier for my jacks and everything to hit on feat turn, regardless as to whether he had Fury on them or not. And if they did have Fury on them, then that would just do a major boost to the damage that I was doing, because a lot of my shooting is around POW 13 or so, and I believe the bulk of his armor on the Wolves is around 17 or so. So dice off 4 is pretty good. And I figured things like ground pounders and my shooting in general would be more useful if he did choose the Tanith list to try to deal with all of that infantry. I was also concerned if I had picked Axis versus the Chromac list. I was concerned about what the stones could do. So Axis, he likes to get forward, pop his feet, catch everything that matters, and then all the beasts and heavy hitters, that sort of thing, will be -2 speed and also cannot charge, trample, slam, that sort of thing. So it typically will neuter what the opponent can do. But in the Chromac list, he had 2 units of stones, which meant that he could still send his beasts pretty far and still be effective, which gets around kind of that control portion of Axis's feat. So I wanted to make sure that I was avoiding that. So I chose Orion, and my opponent chose Chromac 2. So for our deployment, I believe my opponent won the roll and decided to go second so that he could choose sides. So he chose the side of the table where the house was a bit closer to him. He wanted to be able to place at least one beast behind that house with the stones to try and hide them from the shooting. So between that and the hill, and that nice little nook between those 2 forests in the middle of the board, he would have some good defensive positions versus my shooting. So I deployed. I was an extra 2 inches on because of my destruction initiative, so I was pretty far forward. So I was going first. And on my first turn, it was the standard allocating out 1 focus and just having everything trample. So I had my heavies trample so that they could move their full speed for the trample and then reposition 3, which gets them pretty far off the board. I wanted to be in a commanding position so that if he moved forward, I was going to be able to shoot easily at his stuff. Had the Corollary go before my caster so that he could get a free focus and start loading up there. And I believe I also tried to load up the Corollary between the induction and focus allocation so that he would be ready for the next turn. And then everything just kind of trampled forward. I had Orion move up, and I placed a mage site in the nook of that big forest that's in the middle of the table there to try and control where he was going to be able to go. So if he moved forward to try to hide in behind that forest to prevent my shooting, then he would be in the mage site. All I would have to do is upkeep the mage site, and then I would have a free line to him for my shooting. And if he avoided the mage site, then it was going to cause his beasts to flank hard to the left and right of that forest, which meant that on my turn I could simply drop the mage site and then continue shooting at his stuff. So moved everything forward, got the elimination servitors in positions to be shooting next turn, and also the attunement servitors in places where I could get some flares off. And I also got Avenging Force up because that's a great spell with Orion, and I wanted to make sure that I had those free shots in my maintenance phase if he happened to trigger it. So I kept all of my servitors out of range of his, I believe his purebloods have a spray and they have assault, so they threaten something like 19 inches. I did leave one servitor just far enough forward for him to catch so that if he happened to go for that and try to get that assault off and manage to take out that servitor, that it would proc Avenging Force, and then I would get the free move and shot my maintenance phase. So on my opponent's turn, he trampled everything or ran everything forward to get into position. As expected, he avoided the mage site, so he's flanking to the left and the right. And he put a pureblood and I believe he's got a pureblood, the feral geist, a druid, and unit of stones down in behind the house at the bottom of the screen. So everything is blocking line of sight, so I cannot easily shoot at them. And he's got some things spread out up near the top flank as well. So he's got his stalker threatening my zone right there behind the forest, and he also has his pure blood in range of the stones at the top, so he can port him forward if he needs to. So overall, just getting in a fairly aggressive position to try and both prevent my shooting if possible and be in a spot where when I move forward on the following turn, he will be able to start attacking. He's got a stalker on a hill to get that extra bonus to defense, and he's kept Chromac back a bit to just try and make sure that he stays safe. So on my turn, I know this is going to be feet turn on turn 2. Figure it's a pretty good time to try and get some damage on him. He's left his beasts pretty close together in such a spot where it looks like I can get some ground pounders to hit both beasts at the top flank. So I took a look and placed templates, and sure enough, I could place a 4-inch AoE ground pounder template in between the stalker and the pureblood at the top of the screen and also catch that stone. My goal was, if possible, to try and neuter those stones as well to prevent his shenanigans with porting things. So move forward, Orion feeded. He shot the stalker that was on the hill with Orion's gun, and I believe I did a little bit of damage, but the big thing is that I pushed Getorix 2 inches back. So Getorix is far enough back that it helps to keep him from being relevant on his turn. I believe, I can't remember if on his turn he feeded or not. I honestly don't remember. Oh, no, it was the following turn that he... no, this was the turn he feeded. He feeded on his turn two... No, he hadn't feeded last turn. He feeded at the end of this turn too. So his beast didn't have the extra armor from the Chromac feat. And so I moved forward. I had feeded with Orion, shot the stalker to push Getorix back, just tried to get some general work done with some flares in different places. I used the ground pounder jacks to do some really good damage on the stalker and the pureblood, and I believe I ended up killing the stalker at the top flank and mangling the pureblood pretty heavily. I also put my Cipher in such a spot where I could shoot at my servitors to place down rough terrain AoE. So the pureblood does not have Pathfinder by default. He actually has to warp for Ghostly. So if he's warping for that, he's not warping for strength. So I figured that would be a good control portion of the board. So that's where you can see those AoEs. One of the AoEs actually scattered, so you can see that it's a bit farther back and maybe not quite as relevant. But I do have one AoE placed in such a way that it's going to be in the way of his pureblood. I was also able to move an assimilator down toward the bottom, and my opponent didn't realize that with the ground pounder, I can actually place it in such a way that as long as I can see part of the template, I can actually still hit things behind things like cover and obstructions and that sort of thing. So I was able to place a 4-inch AoE in such a way that I clipped the stone that was down behind the house and removed that, and I also removed his druid, or the Black Cloud Wayfarer, I believe it's called. I knew those are going to be a big part of this game because they have Hunter's Mark, which gives plus 2 inches of movement and free charge. I really needed to make sure that those were taken out as quickly as possible. I was always looking throughout the game for spots where I could do magic bullets and that sort of thing to try and get some damage on the Black Cloud to make sure that they were taken out if at all possible. And so I was in fact able to take out that Black Cloud behind the house and get rid of one of the stones so that I could kind of neuter what he did behind that house down below on the left flank. And I believe I also, on that turn, I moved my elimination servitors on the top flank forward, and I took a bunch of shots at the stone and left the middle stone on, I think, one box. I believe there was one of the elimination servitors didn't get close enough, and I think that might have also been the turn that I cast a couple of magic bullets. I believe I cast one magic bullet to try and get a shot on the stone and then bounce that to the black clad to try to take him out. But I left the middle stone with just one box left, and I didn't quite kill the black clad. All right, so on his turn, he had moved forward with his, I believe he cast Carnage. Move forward with his pure blood on my kind of in the middle of the screen there and did a bunch of damage to the monitor. He didn't quite take it out. He left it on just a few boxes. He moved his Feral Geist and his pure blood on the bottom flank in behind that house, and he feeded as well to make sure that he was going to be getting that extra armor. I believe you get extra strength as well, so that helped with the pure blood along the top. And the black clad at the top moved forward and I believe did some sprays to get rid of some servitors there. And he also had his stalker in the middle there of the screen charge forward. I believe he took out an assimilator, and then he used the free animus. I believe the animus ends up being free because of the theme that the theme that he was using. And then he was able to, I believe it was Lightning Strike that allows you to move a full advance afterwards. So he charged in, took out the assimilator, and then backed up in behind the forest to have that line of sight blocked. And he moved Getorix up onto the hill to be in a bit more of a commanding position as well. There were a few times in the last turn that my opponent forgot that he had hyper aggressive, so there wasn't necessarily as much movement there as there perhaps could have been. So that was the end of turn 2. So on my turn 3, and we both also scored, I believe, at the end of that turn. Yes, I scored on my zone because he didn't quite move his pure blood far enough ahead to be contesting my zone, so I was able to score there. And I was silly and I hadn't run a servitor far enough. Either I ran it into his, no, I did not move forward enough to get into his zone to prevent him from scoring in his turn. He would have simply had to kill that one servitor, but I should have had at least something in his zone to make him use activations for it. So on my turn, I moved forward and continued with shooting things. So using my servitors as best possible to try and clear out the zone at the top. I've still got that black clad there. I wanted to try to clear out that top zone because I wanted to eventually be at the point where I could run my unit of mechanics into that top zone and potentially score. So I allocated out focus, I believe, from the Corollary, and I had some more ground pounder work done. So I got, I believe I did some ground pounder shots to try to take out the pure blood or soften him up if I could, because the ground pounder ignores a target and melee penalty. But I left him still alive after that. But I was able to use the monitor to hit him. I believe I got a flare on him to drop his defense a bit, and then with the monitor he has not critical sustained attack but just sustained attack, so I boosted the first attack to make sure I hit and then just bought until he was dead, and that was after I had the mechanics move forward and heal him enough. I believe I had forgotten about my objective being able to heal and didn't actually heal from that, but I could have also done that. But the mechanic was able to get close enough to do that. I believe the diffuser moved up and took at least a shot at something too. I can't fully recall. I was also able to remove, with ground pounders, remove the second stalker. So I was pretty far ahead on the attrition game in terms of the beasts that I had taken out. I had taken out, at this point, I believe, all of his wolves, but I was getting really low in my time. I took quite a long time to figure out where my focus went, and just in general, just taking too long. So I've got Orion back where I think he will be safe. But definitely need to work on speeding up my time. This time I did remember to put at least a servitor in his zone. I made a bit of a mistake. I put more than one, and I really just needed to put one in there so that he was not was not scoring on my turn, just to prevent that scoring, because I was going to be able to score on my turn because I have jacks in my zone and he is not contested there. But I put 2 in there and made him at least waste an activation to make sure one of those was destroyed. So over to his turn, he got rid of some of the servitors in the bottom. We played this a little bit wrong. You can actually see that in the previous shot, the pure blood at the very bottom that was hiding behind the house. It hyper-aggressived, but it actually hyper-aggressived down and around the corner of the house after my simulator had shot at it, because he had moved it too close to the house that I could clip it with the ground pounder. But with hyper-aggressive, you actually have to move directly towards one, a straight line toward the source of the attack. So that was actually played incorrectly. He would have had to stay behind that house, and he could have possibly trampled for it. I think I tried to leave my assimilator far enough back that I couldn't be trampled and reached there, but I believe I was also getting low on time, and I forgot to do a couple of things. Like, I think that assimilator on the bottom flank, I meant to have him reposition a little bit differently, so he couldn't be in a spot where he could have gotten charge. So on his turn, he did have his bottom pure blood charge in to my assimilator on the bottom. He did a bunch of damage. He kind of had to work around the charge angles a little bit because I did have a couple of servitors there. Geterix got forward. I believe he killed a couple of servitors just to get in a more commanding position to threaten my stuff. He did put a Feral Geist in my zone and contested there. I did make a mistake earlier in the game where I had meant to either use my mechanics to give an assimilator magical weapons, or casted the spell piercer to give magical weapons, because at one point, I believe on my feet turn, the Feral Geist was actually in such a spot where I could actually clip the Feral Geist with the ground pounder, and that would have taken him out and not left him with that nice contesting piece. So that was a mistake on my part, so he was able to contest there. And I just continued trying to get some work done on the top flank. I believe my elimination servitors were just trying to do some shooting there. He's got 1 stone left, and he's also got the black clad left there that's on the hill. And that's where we left off. On his turn, he had his the Gorax move forward as well to be in a more threatening position, but I'm getting really, really low on time at this point. And so on back to my turn, just trying to get more damage done. I'm definitely feeling the pressure. I'm down to less than a couple of minutes on my turn 4. I believe our score is at 2-2 right now, and it's just a matter of me trying to get work done while doing what's relevant. So I managed to clear the zone at the top. My intention was to fully clear that zone and just run my mechanics so I could have scored there. So I cleared the zone. I meant to get some work done on the bottom with that assimilator as well, to try to possibly take out the Warp Wolf at the bottom. Because I did have still my my Weapon Master Fist that was online after he had charged into me there. But a little bit stressed at this point with how low my clock was, so I actually forgot to run my mechanics into the top zone, which was a mistake on my part. That would put me up 1 more point, and I should have also had one of the servitors run up to get into the zone. My intention had been to trample or run or charge my monitor at least to get into the zone, so it would have been something that was difficult to remove in the zone. But again, this is the point where I'm so low on clock that mistakes were made. So on his turn, he managed to clear out the bottom zone. He's scoring on his zone as well, and he did get Geterix in to, I believe he took out my Corollary. I meant to reposition my Corollary in such a way to be out of charge ranges as well, but I forgot that. Earlier in the game, there was a spot where he was looking, and he was very close to having Geterix in a spot where he could have charged a couple of servitors and then used overtake to move and get pretty close to my caster, but luckily he was just far enough away that wasn't the case, so he didn't get a chance for that assassination run a turn or 2 ago. But Geterax is definitely in there, wreaking some havoc right now. And again, my clock's really low. He's down. He's got about 10 minutes or so left. So the attrition is starting to take a swing here, and I'm getting very low on clock. And he is also scoring on this turn. I believe he scored at least 2 points on this turn as well. So I apologize. I believe a couple of the overlay shots here are incorrect for the scoring. So at that point, it was just me trying to get in and get a bit of work done if possible. I moved my, I believe, my Cipher in and punched Getterix a bit, but Getterix also had spiny growth on, so it's doing some damage there. He's scoring again on his zone, and I did manage to put a servitor in the bottom zone this time so he wouldn't score on my turn. But after all said and done, I do end my turn and I have 15 seconds left. And under the current Steamroller 2017 rules, you have to have at least 15 seconds left to complete a turn. So at this point, the game is over because technically I have DeathClocked. But he's also able to, if we had played further, he probably would have been able to score up on me from there as well and get ahead enough on points. So that definitely, I had gotten a good swing on the attrition earlier on. And if I had played faster, I think it would have been in a much better spot. And there's definitely some positioning errors there, mainly with me getting kind of stressed out about my clock. I should have had my mechanics in my zone or in the circular zone at the top, so I could have scored up a point. And there were a couple of turns when I should have had at least one servitor in his zone to prevent that scoring on my turn, and at least have kept the scoring train rolling, so that scenario wouldn't have been a consideration. I think Orion, if he can keep the points fairly similar, or if you can keep it to a point where it's very difficult for them to score up to 5, then it would have been, it makes his game easier because then he can focus more on the attrition aspect. I believe Getterix also had on that turn he charged in and he left the objective, I believe, on one box. That would have put him up on points as well. So overall, good game. I learned lots. Definitely need to work on time management. I'm going to be playing with with time turns on the side as well as DeathClock, just to try to keep me more accountable. I'm going to plan to do that more on practice games when I'm not on camera, but definitely lessons learned and good to get some practice against Circle. So hope you guys enjoyed that. Hope you learned something, and we look forward to seeing you on the next game log. Thanks.